Good morning. We have another sunshiny day. We're glad that you all chose to spend a little time with us, but please go outside this afternoon. A little vitamin D. We will call the April 7th State Board of Education meeting to order. And Denise, would you please call the roll?
Patsy Ko-Johns.
Here.
Lisa Fricke.
Here.
John Witzel.
Here.
Molly O'Halloran. Patrick McPherson.
Here.
Maureen Nichols.
Here.
Rachel Wise.
Here.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
Yes.
We have 7 present, 1 absent.
Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. Please remember to turn on your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you are finished. And please turn off any personal cell phones. Thanks. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 2nd and 3rd meetings?
I move we approve the minutes for the March 2 through 3, 2017 State Board of Education meeting as published.
I second that motion.
We're all in favor of it. We're all okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran. John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricke.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Johns.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, Commissioner, do you have any recommended changes for today's agenda?
No recommended changes for today.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda today?
Move to approve.
Second. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Denise, would you please call the roll?
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran. Lisa Fricke.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Johns.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, we now move into our public comment period. We do have someone who has asked for an appearance, Mr. Tom Neal from the Nebraska Organ Recovery. Mr. Neal, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the time today to discuss an important matter. My name is Tom Neal. I'm the Public Relations Coordinator for Nebraska Organ Recovery. We're the organization who manages and facilitates organ and tissue donation for the state of Nebraska. We were established in 1977 and we're the federally designated as the organ procurement organization for our state. We're one of 58 organizations across the United States who manage the donation process. Our mission is to maximize the recovery and quality of organs and tissue for transplantation while maintaining sensitivity, compassion, and respect for people of all cultures. As a public relations coordinator, one of my main functions is to provide public education and awareness of organ and tissue donation. Each year I travel across the state to educate students in the various high schools about what it is, what it means to register to be an organ, tissue, and eye donor, and the benefits that can be derived to those who receive a transplant. For transplant recipients, this is truly a second chance at life. I give about 200 presentations each year to roughly 40 different high schools, only about 12% of the total high schools in Nebraska. These presentations could be for an anatomy class, biology, physiology, everyday living, health class, driver's education, or potentially a science club. The message is the same no matter what type though. I discuss who we are, what we do, the process of donation, what it means to register, how one person could actually save or heal over 100 people with their decision, and then I spend time answering questions. Things people may have seen or heard, misconceptions, new trends, medical advancements. Students and educators alike appreciate the content of our programs. Our programs are free to educators and can vary from anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half in length. Before each new school year, I send out materials to every high school across Nebraska in the hopes of showing benefits of our presentation, and I encourage educators to invite me out to their class. Sadly, though, some don't. Some feel that their small class size does not justify a trip to their community. While Nebraska Organ Recovery firmly believes that every young adult should hear a presentation about organ and tissue donation to make an informed decision when it presents itself. When a person goes in to get their driver's license for the first time, there's a registration question on the application. Most students have never considered the impact of their decision or what it really means to answer that question. Over 1/3 of first-time drivers leave the question blank. Another third leave it or say no. Focus groups performed at Nebraska High School have shown that prior to our program, 92% of students had no opinion, and frankly, no knowledge about donation because the subject never came up. After the presentation to the class, we found that 96% had a positive understanding of donation and they felt comfortable making the decision on the application for their driver's license. Whether they choose to register or not, that's up to them. That's a personal choice. But with education prior to that decision, students have the confidence to make the decision that is right for them. Currently, 17 states have mandated that the subject of organ donation be part of the senior high curriculum. New Jersey was the first in 2008 with the HERO Act, and most recently, Nevada unanimously approved the addition a few days ago and is just waiting the governor's signature. These programs vary from 30 to 60 minutes in length and provide valuable information to the students. Regardless of the mandate or not, though, all 50 states have some type of educational offering about organ and tissue donation. Some states provide materials to educators, some hire staff specifically to perform educational programs, and others have a volunteer pool to provide a speaker. But all organizations such as ours know the importance of awareness and education. We performed a survey in the fall of 2016 to 600 citizens across Nebraska from various walks of life and found that 98% of those surveyed support organ and tissue donation. Nationally speaking, surveys have repeatedly shown that 95% of Americans support organ donation. Last week, President Trump proclaimed April as Donate Life Month. I'd like to take a quote out of his proclamation. It says in part, "We continue our efforts to raise awareness of the life-saving potential Americans have as donors. The Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network reports that 33,606 transplants were performed during 2016, which is an 8.5% increase over 2015. Still, additional donors are needed. More than 118,000 people are currently on the waiting list for organ transplants, and thousands of our family members and friends die each year waiting for the matches. This month, we remind Americans that people of all ages and from all walks of life can help save lives. I encourage Americans everywhere to learn about how they can participate in the gift of life by becoming organ and tissue donors and the many other ways they can give to those in need. I call upon healthcare professionals, volunteers, educators, government agencies, faith-based and community groups, and private organizations to help raise awareness of the urgent need for organ and tissue donors throughout our nation." End quote. Currently, there are nearly 500 Nebraskans on the waiting list for a life-saving organ transplant, and actually 1 in 6 Nebraskans are at risk for developing kidney disease that could require a transplant. Approximately 16,000 Nebraskans die each year for various reasons, but the most organ donors we've ever had in a one-year period in the 40 years of our existence has been 78. We need to educate Nebraskans about the benefits of donation, and the sooner the better. We found that once a Nebraskan has made the decision to register, it's truly a lifetime decision. Currently, about 55% of our eligible Nebraskans have made the decision to register. In comparison, 72% of Iowa's population has taken the time to register with a mandated educational program in the high school curriculum. 98% of Nebraskans register through the Department of Motor Vehicles. With education prior to the application for a driver's license, we can undoubtedly raise registration rates more in line with our neighbors, and this just adds to the potential for more lives saved through organ donation. The goal of Nebraska Organ Recovery is to have an organ donation education program added to the curriculum of all Nebraska high schools in either 9th or 10th grade, whether it be part of the school program or part of driver's education. I ask that you give it thoughtful consideration as you make changes to current programs. I realize that such a mandate may be a lengthy process, but I ask for your support in approving a mandated curriculum for donation education in the state. Until such a mandate is approved, however, as a member of the State Board of Education, I challenge you all to become advocates for donation education. As you communicate to those in your districts, let them know that our program exists. It's free of charge and can have a lasting impact on the students of each class. You have the power to save lives through organ donation. This is the easiest and most unselfish gift that you can give, and it's truly the gift of life. By encouraging educators to take advantage of our program in their classrooms, you could have a positive impact on saving the life of someone in need. I will again be sending out information to each school in August, but if anyone wants a program before this term is out, they can go to our website at nedonation.org and click on the link to request a speaker. Thank you for this opportunity today. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'd gladly entertain them. Thank you.
We'll now move into our regular public comment period, and I have one card from Mrs. Pinkerton. Mrs. Pinkerton, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I have several handouts for you, and my remarks I headed with Khalid Mumin, PhD. If it's not about the kids, I don't have the time. OPS Superintendent candidate Dr. Khalid Mumin showed us a glimpse of what his no excuses commitment to academic excellence could mean to Omaha public school children. Respect is something Mumin broadcast consistently. Respect for the teachers, coach, and guidance counselor who believed in him. Respect for his fiancée, respect for his board at Reading. Respect for the people he encountered in Omaha during his 4-day unofficial pre-application reconnaissance trip. Respect for Shakespeare. Such fundamental respect might not be apparent to everyone seeking Mumin's attention. Pacing in front of us at a meet and greet, he confessed that he tends to keep moving. Here was the line, "If it's not about the kids, I don't have the time." Value can come from the disappointment of losing him if we learn from the experience. Withdrawing his name from consideration, Dr. Mumin observed that he didn't believe Omaha leaders had kids' best interests in their actions. Does the lack of transparency and accountability distract OPS from a focus on excellence? I've shared with you a press release dated October 26, 2015. Please note that OPS Superintendent Mark Evans is quoted calling the Minnesota Humanities Center a key partner in OPS education planning and professional development. On what authority did he make that claim? OPS faculty, students, and families were offered up to MHC without the protection of any contract between OPS and Minnesota Humanities. If I'm not mistaken, MHC holds a copyright to the data they collected, which they can sell. 6 days prior to this press release, some 1,800 people accepted an invitation from OPS to gather at the Teacher Administration Building and be lied to about proposed changes to human growth and development. Instruction. Karen Spencer May assured us that Planned Parenthood had never, did not, would never be a resource for OPS sex education. The following April, at an OPS board meeting, member Marion Fay declared Planned Parenthood to be a fine organization, taking no responsibility for the public being deceived for months. Fay complained that the administration had never been had the authorization to pander to the public's loathing for Planned Parenthood. Might Fay have been holding herself accountable to the same party that signaled Evans to embrace Minnesota Humanities? Is this shadow government what derailed the OPS superintendent search? The same lack of respect for parents' beliefs and values is evidenced in the birth through grade 3 continuum graphic I've provided, showing school as hub. Even if we were to determine that professionals should oversee programming for infants, parents should not be considered subordinate to these experts in the lives of their children. Furthermore, must these professionals all subscribe to a worldview that denies the humanity of the preborn? If we're to be honest, we must recognize that such a belief creates a blind spot in understanding human development. And last, my friend Dr. Mark, Christian expert on Islam, hopes his calendar will permit him to speak to you at a future meeting. Please note the flyer I've shared with you describing a men-only event in Omaha. If it's a fit for you, that would be wonderful. In any case, you may be interested to note Mark's credentials as they're listed on the flyer. And if we find a date for him to come before you, I will email you to give you an opportunity for questions. And once again, thank you for your service.
Microphone.
We have no other cards. Okay, we'll move into our action items on today's agenda. Maureen, is there a motion to accept the Enhanced Education Grant Award from the Department of Education? Okay. See, now I'm not the only one.
I move to accept the Enhanced Education Grant Award from the U.S. I'm sorry. Taking after you, Pat.
I know, I'm sorry. I set a poor example.
I move to accept the Enhanced Education Grant Award from the U.S. Department of Education.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Denise, please call the roll.
Lisa Fricke,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-John,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes,
Molly O'Halloran. 7 yes, 1 absent.
thank you. Maureen, is there a motion to approve the contract with Ed Counts to provide
Yes.
the services?
I approve the contract with Ed Counts to provide services related to the Enhanced Assessment Grant awarded to the Nebraska Department of Education.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any more discussion? Rachel did. Okay, your votes, please.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, John Witzel,
Yes.
Lisa Fricke,
Yes.
Patsy Ko-John,
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay. We will move to 7.2, Success and Access Domain. John, is there a motion in your domain?
Thank you, Pat. I move we approve the non-public schools appearing on the accompanying list to operate for 2017 to 2018 school year in accordance with the provisions of Rule 1492 NAC 14 regulations and procedures for legal operation of approved non-public schools.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Patrick. Any discussion? Okay, your votes, please.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricke,
Yes.
Patsy Ko-John,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
We move on to legislation. Rachel, do you have a motion?
Yes, the Legislative Committee has one motion, and that is to support the Amendment 625 to LB 14, which is supporting civics education, civics readiness.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any questions or discussion? Okay, your votes, please.
Lisa Fricke,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, John Witzel.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-John,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Our next item is coming from the Strategic Planning Performance and Improvement Committee, and I'm asking for a motion to approve the Learning Community Plan of Douglas and Sarpy Counties.
I would move to approve the Learning Community of Douglas and Sarpy County Community Action Plan as presented.
I second that motion.
Any other discussion on this? We had a good discussion yesterday. Okay, your votes, please.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, Patsy Ko-Johns,
Yes.
Lisa Fricky.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, our next is Budget and Finance Committee. John, do you have motions?
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the proposed revisions to Title 93, Chapters 1 through 16, reference 93 NAC 1-16, Nebraska Department of Education Personnel Rules.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Johns.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Do you have another one?
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to move that we adopt the proposed revisions to Rule 192 NAC 1, Rules and Regulations Governing the Audit of Nebraska Public School Districts.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Your votes, please.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Johns.
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, we will move on. For approval of the consent agenda did we have anything pulled off of the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Denise, please call the roll.
Patsy Ko-Johns,
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, we move into, you have some things listed there under miscellaneous of our things that are going on, and if you have questions about those, you can contact Donlin, and she'll contact a staff member for you. And I have one other thing, and then I think we'll take a short break because we have a special presentation coming up, and we can let them get set up. But I think we should wish our Deputy Commissioner, Dr. Friesen, happy birthday for tomorrow.
She's hiding.
We'll get her later. I told you I was going to embarrass her. She's not here. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll move into our special presentation. Okay, we will resume our meeting, and the next item on the agenda is a special presentation on our ESSA status. And Commissioner Bloomstead and Brian, would you like to bring your team?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple opening thoughts here. Given that we had a little bit of time for this, really my hope is that they're able to go through a presentation and we can talk a little bit about where we're at from a status perspective with ESSA, what other ideas or thoughts you may have, given the recent opportunities for folks to be across the country in different ways, NASB and other things. I know there's some input that I would hope you would be able to kind of provide as additional thoughts. I know we'll talk a little bit about where we've been from from the stakeholder engagement perspective to, kind of what are the key principles. But really, my hope is to be able to have them present and then have a bit of a dialogue so we can get some feedback from you. And I think that's basically the way we've set that up. So I'll turn it over to Brian and Matt to lead us through that.
Good morning, Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner, and Matt Houston, Accreditation and School Improvement. So, as you are all well aware, this last month we held 7 stakeholder meetings across the state of Nebraska. Many of you attended and participated, so we wanted to bring you up to date with some big picture stuff that we heard, some of the results. If you look to e-meetings, you will see what was attached this morning is a draft report from Data Research and Evaluation about some of the information we received. They're still working on all of that information to get us more deep dives into it, but we think it was a good starting point. This is clear that the 7 meetings is not the end of stakeholder engagement, nor was it the beginning of stakeholder engagement, as you're well aware. On the screen, you see the big timeline, and that timeline's been shortened to just be where we're at the moment after March and where we're going till September 18th, which is the due date the U.S. Department of Ed has set for submitting state plans under ESSA. Right now, there are 17 states and the District of Columbia who are intending or have already filed their plans at the April deadline that was set. So there are some things we will learn through that whole process. As you can see, we did the stakeholder engagement in all of those. We're doing the presentation to you today. The AQuest conference is next Monday and Tuesday, which there will be more input gathered, more engagement going on. We will update you, and I think this is a conversation for you as to what you want to do at the May meeting, because as we looked at the agendas for the state board, it was last fall the last time you actually talked about AQuest. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes on AQuest and what's going on this year, but it may be time for you to start thinking about that. This whole process started with the team starting first with AQuest. That has been the framework of all of the gathering of input, all of that. As you recall, in December, you adopted the strategic vision and direction for the department and the state, so the team is taking some of those key components from that, using the stakeholder engagement on that. As the timeline, there is an event in DC, May 16th, that CCSSO is putting on. It is what I call a mock state peer review of your plan. Get lots of good feedback from others as to what we've got. We intend for you to have the public ready draft at the June meeting for your input, review, some editing going on, final approval for the commissioner to submit it in August, because there is a 30-day window where the governor has to be given the opportunity to review. We've already had conversations with staff at the governor's office about this and everything else, and ultimately submission in September of 2017, 5 months from now. Seems like a lot of time. That's not a lot of time. So the next slide is going to kind of give you the big buckets: continuous school improvement under Title I and Title III, the effective educators, and the well-rounded education, the Title IV funding that at the moment doesn't exist in any of the continuing resolutions, but it's promised under ESSA. So The next slide will kind of give you the big picture. This is kind of where it is at the moment for AQuest. The evidence-based analysis isn't listed there, although it was used very limited in the first classification, and there's more work going on with that behind the scenes. We're out in the field right now getting the second EBA completed and inputted, so there's analysis going on there. The raw classification that we did did not have English language learners in it at all. That's a requirement under ESSA. That all moves into your state accountability plan, and that may seem, oh, that's real simple, that's a little more complex, and there's been work going on in that whole area that goes with it. But ESSA says you can have more indicators, which was one of the stakeholder engagement activities. So we clearly asked stakeholders what they thought, what they heard. As you can see, this is a graphic representation. There is more information in that data report that's attached about what we heard. Obviously, mental and social health clearly stands out. School climate stands out. Engagement stands out. So
I just have a question on procedure, which it doesn't make a difference to me. Do you want discussion and questions as you go through, or would you prefer to go through the full presentation and come back to questions, or just let me know what your
I'll
preferred?
leave that up to you as to how you want us. We can go back to slides. We can do it all and then go back if you want, or we can stop as we go along. What's
I'm fine
most
with
convenient?
questions in between. I think it works just as well to have the dialogue while we're going through it, to me,
Right.
so.
Yeah, that's fine with
yeah.
us.
So, I mean, I will then start asking some questions, and we actually have to go back to a couple of slides. On
Which one?
back one more.
There you go.
Okay, so on the additional indicator for the AQuest classification, right now, these indicators are what you would be a part of raw classification for the most part, is what
Yes.
you're looking at, that this will somehow. So under raw classification, as opposed to one box with a question mark, have we entertained more than one box?
We asked, yeah.
I mean, are we open to discussions that go beyond this process? So, for example, one of the things that was since raw classification tends to be some sort of a statistical kind of measure, one of the states is using some of they're integrating their current tech ed Perkins accountability process. And so as a part of their current tech ed accountability process, they have what would be considered program completers, I believe. Corey, I think
Yep.
that's the
Yes.
term.
Yep.
Brian, can you help me? Yeah, concentrators. Okay, thanks. I couldn't remember the exact term, but they have interfaced the reporting of the Perkins reporting as kind of their career readiness measure. How many students actually complete a program of study or concentrate, whatever the language is. But I thought that really made a lot of sense. We get great results. We have very good reports from those current tech ed Perkins reports. It helps to continue to have a different kind of emphasis on the importance of career readiness and career activities. Is that a piece that you have looked at all, or looked at what those way to interface that might be?
There have been conversations up here about that data, its possible uses and everything else, but that's also the point of this, getting input
so I
from the
would
board.
recommend,
Yeah.
if you want formal recommendations, I would recommend that we explore and you come back with what indicators that are used in our career and tech ed component for Perkins might be viable indicators to use within raw classification. And I think if it goes beyond what these little boxes are, I think that's important for us in AQuest, and then certainly enhances where we're moving with ESSA as well. So I would like to see information back then maybe in May, about what of those indicators might be really viable indicators to integrate into the raw classification for AQuest.
Any other board members at this point?
I had a question on this side here, and I'll just bring it up. I think it's important that we make sure in a conversation that we have, it's one thing what we do for ESSA, it's another thing that we do for AQuest. And so in this conversation, my recommendations will be for AQuest, and if we're using it for AQuest, that we consider it then for ESSA as well. So it's not, ESSA may have a minimum indicator expectation. We may be going beyond the minimum, and that was kind of what I took away from NASB, are the states that are really taking on their accountability systems, and their accountability systems are their framework for ESSA. And so they're not hung up on number of indicators, they're not hung up on, they're more focused on what is a robust accountability system for their state. And I think that's a really healthy conversation, and I think that's a conversation we've been having around AQuest, but we haven't had it for a while.
For a while.
So it's time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's why the career readiness piece is a piece I don't think we have thought through a really effective way. And my aha, we've had a lot of years of good data around what we collect for current tech ed and Perkins. Maybe this is a good time to really interface those in AQuest and then subsequently ESSA.
Thank you for answering my question. Whatever we do, and I take into account what Rachel just explained, how things need to fit together. But as we look at that fourth indicator, non-academic, from ESSA, every school district is unique in their needs. One school might have done all they can for the safety issues, another school might be working on, the climate change, but somehow come up with an umbrella that meets the needs of all districts, and maybe some choices could be underneath that umbrella of the indicator, because every school is a little unique, and a variety of differences in what they receive as aid, and I think that needs to be in the back of our minds as we look at what we need for AQuest and for ESSA to meet the needs of all school districts. So just a thought.
No, I will highlight along with that, so other states that that I'm aware of are doing some things similar to perhaps what we've done with EBA, but using a multiple indicator, multiple metric approach that goes into that is also appropriate. And so there's a lot of different things that I think in our design, our intention was to include a lot of important activities or important theories of action relative to what our schools are doing to improve education. And I think in part when we go out and ask about a singular indicator, we get an idea of that range of possibilities, but there are ways that we could explore it. I think as Rachel highlights, ways to include them in our base of our AQuest model versus just thinking about it separate for just to meet the requirements of ESSA. And so I think balancing that and having this conversation is helpful, so you feel comfortable in balancing that. I don't want to just meet ESSA requirements, because I don't think that's our approach. It never hasn't been our approach all along. But this notion of integrating what we really want with AQuest with this, so it meets there. We really don't want two separate accountability systems either, and so that's also our intention as we go through this. And so, so it's nice to see you shake your heads when I say that. I'm like, good, okay, we're on the same page there.
If I can add to that, I think that was probably the other messaging that we heard, is this concept of multiple measures. And we have kind of focused on two ways to look at that, raw classification and EBA. And I wonder if there are other kind of framework to get to that multiple measure process that really expands those measures, and what might that look like. And I think this would be an important time to map that out. And so whether it be something that does fit in raw classification, whether it fits in EBA, or if there's a third way to bring some measures in, I think that would be helpful to understand what that might look like and how that could be. I think those are decisions we as a board have to make. I mean, we have to, I think, look at, it's no different than our discussion on assessment and cut scores. And Pat, as you so eloquently described, you've been doing cut scores for a lot of years here. Those are things that are really important conversations for us to have. I think our accountability system should be board-approved accountability system of the components within it and the process. And if the process is such that we identify various cut scores, so to speak, that's what we do. And that will change as assessment changes, or it may change as whatever indicators that we put forward. But I think that's our responsibility to make those recommendations based on the input and the professional recommendations brought forward from the department.
So in regards to the Perkins, I'm sorry. The Perkins reports from our schools, it would speak volumes in regards to their activity, if you will, with CE. Is that?
Right. I think, you know, and Brian, I'm going to look to you a little bit because I haven't looked at any. It might be good to bring forward to a board a Perkins report from last year if we haven't looked at it for a while. But there's quite a few different elements that you report on in Perkins that I think are an example of elements that might be really effective to use in the process. I know that the program of study would be one. The I know you do interesting elements with graduation rate and breakdown of participation. So again, we need the experts to give us some of that guidance, and I'm not the expert on that. So.
But I do appreciate the discussion, because one of the struggles the team has had is, well, this is ESSA, but AQuest is greater than ESSA because we have Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, we have IDEA, we have now at this moment ESSA, we have Perkins, which are all the federal programs. So are we just writing to ESSA, or are we writing for the big picture? And that has been, appreciate the discussion by you as board members. That helps the staff understand some of the other issues that are going on. And again, this all started out by using AQuest. We didn't start from a narrow focus trying to work out. We started from the work you had already done on AQuest. I think when we get to the end of this, you're going to see, you heard all of this in AQuest, and it's coming right back up again in stakeholder engagement. But let's see what we hear more of. Yes.
And you had to do that, Brian. You had to bring up IDEA. Are you reading my notes?
But
maybe we were at similar conferences and had similar conversations going on. An example, Louisiana was a really interesting example of their interface with IDEA around concentrated focus on narrowing achievement gap between students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers. And that they are, again, multiple measure, and so I don't understand how their measures work, but in essence, they're getting a, quote, bump if they're demonstrating closing that achievement gap between students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers. And they felt from an equity perspective and from an accountability perspective, that's a group that we haven't focused on so much. And I think when we look at IDEA and special education, I believe the Supreme Court ruled a week or two ago.
Last week.
Brian?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be important for us to have consideration, and it brings focus back to, are we providing the educational supports and needs for our kids with disabilities? So again, IDEA and what we do with meeting the needs with kids with disabilities would be another important area. Check off my list.
As you can see, we've been thinking bigger than just ESSA and that, but there are a lot of pieces that go with that, and some of this is helpful for the people who are trying to do the work as to what they need to be focusing on. They have spent, yesterday I told you about all the hours staff has spent here at the department just responding to the state legislature. these people behind me have spent even thousands of more hours just working on this. So in the sense of it, you may not see everything there is work that's been going on. There have been meetings across the floor that they've had with people, pulling information, gathering data and all of that. Some of them actually do need to sleep at night, some of them aren't, and that's part of the problem because they're putting in their hours on top of their hours and everything else. So the conversation that you're providing is helpful. We also recognize, as I used to say about AQuest, it's the Model T of Henry Ford. It is not your Ford Fusion you're driving down the road today, but we all think of what we're driving today. How did you get there? Those are the pieces of AQuest that are still to be built, and some of those pieces are going to fit under ESSA specifically, but have to be broader than that. So in the sense of we asked at the stakeholder engagement about effective educators, the Title II funding that comes with this, and the next slide, these are the qualities of effective educators. There was an activity during that stakeholder engagement that asked people to take all of that and give us the top 3 from their perspective, and there's the chart that shows you that. And in the sense of, I'm just going to stop there because that's a lot in that. I am not an expert on that, but the big 3, there's your big, there were all of those.
I think one of the things that's important to recognize here is as we started the stakeholder, we started asking questions of how do you identify effective educators, and then with the idea is that how do you ensure access for all students to those effective educators, and so the conversation evolved even as the stakeholder engagements traveled across the state, and we were able to get to questions that were deeper with the help from our friends in western Nebraska, and we moved across the state and to finish in Omaha, really to how do you use those funds and how do you identify places where we may be willing to invest time at the statewide level to do so. And so these are the results of that conversation.
And I appreciate the results, but I think we've had the conversations before that, you know, in your diagram in this, I pulled it up in this one chart shows, you know, this really is maybe not a broad representation of stakeholders yet, either geographically or from a diversity and kind of position. So not much of a voice of parents in many parts of the state, maybe not much of a voice of others. I think you had a good cross-section in Omaha from my understanding, but outside of that we probably don't have as much. So I think we need to be cautious in using these results for that reason.
Yes, this is just the initial
reporting
phase.
out.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we do have are toolkits that we reach back out to the folks that were part of our 229 that participated across the state, so that they can take that toolkit and engage stakeholders that were not at the table. As we've said, we knew this was a start, and we'll continue that conversation moving forward.
Patrick?
I'd kind of like to follow up on that because stakeholder engagement in my mind is it's far beyond just the educators. We've seen at these recent meetings, you know, I'm thinking back to, I think it was September, we had a stakeholder engagement, and I think it was vocationally oriented in Omaha, and I think across the state, a number of other places where we had lots of businesses present. My concern is we've got a fairly limited timeline. You know, we've got a public draft that supposedly is going to be ready by June, and I do not see that we've reached parents. I don't see that we've reached public officials. I don't see that we've reached business and chambers of commerce, for instance, who are very, you know, they're part of what we're trying to get done here. And so, you know, I think there's some, you know, just from a standpoint of how do we do that, maybe we got to look at some marketing efforts. You know, whether it be press releases to get people involved, whether it be getting somebody on our radio show to talk about what our efforts are, and there's plenty of talk radio shows across the state that could do that. whether it's more involvements like we had back in September with those businesses across the state. I said yesterday that 50% of the population of the world is under 30 years of age, and they're all communicating by social media, and I'm not sure that we're doing enough of that. And you know, what I come out of a kind of a political kind of background of sorts, and you know, having a town hall meeting, you know, which is an electronic town hall meeting, which is what some of these office holders do, where you advertise it and anybody can call in at, you know, during a couple hour time frame and get their opinions out. Those are the kind of things I still think we need to do, but I'm concerned that I don't know that we have enough time to do that. Now, with that said, I'm not trying to diminish in any way what the efforts have been. I just think we've got to make a much stronger effort.
Absolutely. And actually, as this was getting closer to the end of the last 7th meeting, we were already discussing up here, my words, how can you do stakeholder in a box? Give it to somebody. If they want to go out and do their own stakeholder, get it back to you. That's the packets we put together. Dr. Freisen's had some conversations with people. That's what Matt. This is just the beginning of ongoing engagement. That is also one of the things in your strategic vision and direction of establishing a system to do that. This is a beginning. We're not here to tell you this is it. No, absolutely. And some of those are the tools and things we learned. The difficulties when you hold meetings, people have to come to those meetings, and in areas of this state where the population is not as dense, that means they have to take time and drive and do that, which are barriers. But we are also putting together packets that can go back out to all of these people saying, if you'd like to do your own stakeholder engage, here's the kit, here's the tool, here's what you need, here's how you can do it. And that connecting it both to the business community, to other public officials, all of that, those are ideas we have, and that's the work we're going to be doing.
Well, I think we've got to do all those things, but I don't think just handing somebody a package and saying don't do your own stakeholder is what I want to see happen necessarily.
Right.
And my comments on this engagement go beyond ESSA. They go to every time we do a revision of standards, etc. I do not want to see, and I keep coming back to that, a situation where we have 14 electronic meetings across the state at hosted at 7 different locations, and we have 3 parents or 3 people testify. That is not good enough for what we need to do in the future. So, and so my complaint is, or my suggestion is not that it just be ESSA, but we keep that in mind, and we've got to develop a regular procedure and policy for handling these stakeholder engagement opportunities. So,
wouldn't it? And actually, we've had a lot of these good conversations about how we would go about doing that, and I think even Patrick and I have talked quite a bit about that. So the dynamics of webinar environments, but for a lot of reasons, this is. I'm going to tell you the department, and I would tell you probably education generally has not been good at this level of stakeholder engagement before. So I don't want you to think that we have no interest in figuring that out, because I think it is, to Patrick's point, not just about this ESSA engagement. It's actually about building tools to help us communicate better, building connections with the right stakeholders, finding ways to get that done from a systemic approach to how we do stakeholder engagement for everything that we do. I think it's absolutely critical, and it's actually helping build tools that help our schools do that better too in the long run, and our ESUs, because parents don't tend to feel all that connected sometimes in some environments. Certain communities don't tend to feel that connected in some environments. And so as we keep building this, we are trying to think of ways that we lead. So our strategies as we do this, we probably won't do all that perfectly in the time frame that we have to, but I intend not to lose the momentum on what we are building right now. So everything that we do build now is something that we use in other forums for the future. I find it interesting because when we talk about compliance, and there's a lot of the federal ones that say, go do this, go do that. And so what happens over time is people go, okay, I'm gonna go check that box. And we went and talked to a group and said we checked the box. And, you know, it's kind of unfortunately the transition we're making to something that's truly meaningful, truly engaging and ongoing. And I think that becomes the challenge. But I think identifying, if you can help us identify other stakeholders, and I think Patrick already has named several that are quite important for us, other stakeholders and strategies that go specifically to those stakeholder communities as well, because I think it might be different for certain ones. We didn't, like millennials might be willing to go on an ed chat with me on Twitter, you know, although maybe the president would too, couldn't think of it. But the reality is, the reality is there's a lot of ways to engage, and I think there are more tool sets available to us, and we're going to keep exploring those as we go. So.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the staff for doing, if you will, a very good faith effort in getting the word out to our different districts and so forth. But also, it might be a good recommendation for us as a board to maybe review the communication plan or toolkit that we have right now for ESSA, if you will, public engagement. So maybe we can take a look at it and review for possible recommendations and other types of items.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming we're taking notes, so I'll add to the list of groups. And I think from the discussion yesterday, and Commissioner, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about, you know, what's really our responsibility in reaching out with local boards of education as well. And I think that's a very important group and a very important stakeholder group that we need to be strategic in reaching out to get that input for AQUEST, for as we move forward. Because I do think that if they're not well-informed and engaged, then we're missing that opportunity to really impact education across the state. The other piece, I want to go back to Patrick's comment about the stakeholder engagement. That was the current tech ed stakeholder engagement. When we come back in May, can we look at integrating the I'm going to keep looking at Ryan. You're going to wonder why you're sitting over there in that corner. It's probably a good thing Rich isn't sitting in here. Can you bring back, because I think you've developed some specific recommendations and you've pulled all of that information from the stakeholder. If we could see that interwoven, yeah. I think as you know, maybe it wasn't as a stakeholder, but I think it was really important stakeholder engagement and really important feedback, that there wouldn't be any reason not to really strategically incorporate that. So seeing the report and the feedback from those stakeholder engagement meetings might be real valuable as well.
Lisa, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I want to emphasize the agreement of the communication and the staff. Behind the scenes, what you guys have done is remarkable, and I don't think the general public, let alone us, knows the time that you put in. But Alan Bierman is, I don't know what his title is, but he takes care of the press around the state. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so nobody's going to read like the senator or congressman's great big long thing, but if we had every other month or something, a blurb about what's important going on that affects all of these stakeholders, and just to get their attention, and then give our website, if you want more information about this, that keep it short, have a title that's catchy, and out in front of the public throughout the state all the time. It's not a let's fix this now. I think it needs to be an ongoing communication. Because before I ran for the board, I knew what was, well, I thought I knew what was going on because I was an educator. But we're missing the parents, we're missing some of the stakeholders. And my fellow board members might kind of strangle me, but to keep this in the conversation, could it be made a small part of one of the committees that has an ongoing conversation about how to communicate with our stakeholders? Just an idea.
One thing that I don't want us to forget in the conversation as a stakeholder are
our high school students and our higher ed student leaders. And my reasoning on that is they are our future, of course, and they will be soon parents, and they are probably, many of them, already voters and political leaders. I just think we would be remiss not considering them in the stakeholders.
I'd like to recommend this. I keep in contact with my districts on a routine basis, especially when it comes to information coming down from NDE, whether it be engagement meetings, whatever the case may be. I'm working with the districts, and I'd almost recommend our fellow board members, when an issue comes up with our, if you will, stakeholder engagement meetings, get in contact with your districts, get in their face and say, this is what we got going, this phase, but I'm sure they got their communications people, and it would behoove us to work with them as board members. Let's work as a team.
John, I think that's important, though. You have to consider for some, and with Molly not able to be
Yes.
here, distance is, so when you say let's get in the face, keep in mind,
Well, when I said
distance is a
face,
real time and cost perspective
Understand.
for many of us that represent the state. And I think that we have to think strategically about a voice across the state as well.
But we can
And
do
so
our
we
fair
need to
share.
do
I
that.
mean, we can't-
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. Mhm.
Because that little help from the board could make the difference.
Okay, do you want to move on? Oh,
Just,
I'm sorry.
just one additional group, you know, we saw one here this morning, but we have hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits across the state that are dealing with folks that, you know, have all kinds of different issues and see all kinds of problems in their communities as well as opportunities in their communities. And that would be that's a large group that, you know, I think we could value some input from.
Very good.
So, Dr. Friesen has, in part of that work, we've been strategizing with how to get, and in addition to kind of the opportunity for others to engage and use a protocol that we've started to develop, but also asking folks who else to engage. And again, this is part of our permanent collection of this, not just around ESSA, but for us to start to go, what other groups are there? And we're gonna be pretty quickly upon needing your help in that effort, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So the reason I wanted to hand this out is for you to think, okay, what's on this list, missing from this list? Because even when you talk to folks, you could be gathering that formally for us. It doesn't just always help to have a conversation. I mean, that's part of our work, but we actually need some ways that we gather specific information when we need that on occasion, and that's our intention. So I might ask Dr. Friesen if she had anything to add to that. I don't know if I covered, I certainly didn't cover everything she would have covered, but that's probably my guess, so.
When we met with ESU directors on Monday or Tuesday all day, part of our engagement with them was to go through the presentation that Matt Huseman, Janine, and their team had put together. And they provided that information to the ESU's directors. Information was distributed in packets. And then this particular sheet that you see there that has different groups that we asked them to engage with was distributed to them. They understand that the follow-up call is coming to each of them to survey them to which of those different groups meet in their communities, asking them to be the facilitator for some stakeholder engagements. And so even online, we're putting a facilitator packet, so to speak, together, asking them what materials they would like us to send to them to help if they would like one of us to come and help them run a stakeholder engagement. But the explanation that went out to them included not only doing large stakeholder engagement sessions like they participated in, let's say, when we had one at Omaha or one at Lincoln, but also perhaps one that might be just 5 people at the local diner, or a larger one that might be in a student group. And a lot of this is a result of the information that feedback that Matt and Janine received, telling us of some of the different groups. And you'll see there are some groups there that one would not generally think of trying to engage, but it was very important to us, and we put that in place. So it might not be all-inclusive, but this was our first blush at it, and this is what was covered with the ESU directors, and I believe some others were in attendance there also.
Can I ask a question? Doctor, quick question for you. Does the ESUs and the ESU Coordinating Council, do they have a list of stakeholders that they routinely utilize for getting the word out?
That I don't know. I don't think, they didn't give me something like that, John.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the case, but we have ourselves
Yes, ma'am.
large lists of stakeholders and have, for this, been very intentional in wanting to reach beyond the stakeholders that we have generally engaged with.
And one thing I would say, and I think it kind of goes back to that marketing and kind of push, and how do we do that? Again, those are not things that we've done traditionally in education. And I will just say that we're shifting kind of a cultural norm, and maybe even for you as a board, you know, we've not invested in that fashion. We kind of try to do things, quote unquote, on the cheap, right? I mean, but realistically, you kind of get what you pay for on that side of the equation. So even when we did invitations statewide, we went through the normal channels that would invite people to be there, and including with the ESUs. And I think what we're discovering is we're gonna have to get much more specific about asking groups to help us bring people to the table and say we need these groups or these individuals specifically represented. Because when we're general about a request, we just don't get the right folks there. And I think that's our intent, to be much more intentional, so.
Couple last words.
And then we'll let him talk some more.
You know, I mentioned that I had attended a nonprofit meeting here recently on social media, and interestingly, most of these nonprofits are very small, but most of them have somebody that is almost totally dedicated toward working social media and public relations. And, you know, maybe public relations is not the term you want to use in the Department of Education, but communication. And most of those folks have somebody that's totally dedicated toward communication. And maybe we reached the point, I don't like to create jobs unnecessarily, but we're trying to adapt to the future. You know, maybe it's time we had somebody that had that specific, and maybe you do, I don't know, but maybe it's time we had somebody that had that specific job title or, you know, job description.
And I know Lisa wants to say something, but I mean, obviously part of David's role is in that, but we've actually started reshaping what our communications team looks like. That's why we've been doing the work on website. That's why we've been, you know, doing the work to make sure that we have a lot of different tool sets given the nature of communications today. And, you know, it's really easy when we weren't trying to lead anything, by the way, to sit here in Lincoln and not have to worry and just wait for folks to show up at a meeting if they had a concern, and that's what we used to do. Well, when we start to lead, it takes a different communication strategy, and that's what we're trying to move forward to. So this is a great conversation for me, because I feel you know, somewhat like we're on the right track, but we still have work to do, and it's hard to see all that progress immediately, but I think we're really heading that way.
My poor brain can't remember, you were talking before Pat, and you said something very profound, and I was going to remember to say that.
Wish you would have remembered that one time, right?
No, but my point is, I think you're right, to be proactive, and if people, the stakeholders aren't hearing what we're doing in advance, they're going to be reactive and angry. And I don't think that's the direction we want to go. So I think this whole conversation and the behind the work or behind the scenes work, I think we're going in a very positive direction for kids. So thank you for that.
Maureen, and then we'll let these guys talk.
This is a clarification question for Deb. So when you spoke with the ESU folks, Part of that conversation was to develop stakeholders and try to have some stakeholder meetings in their districts that they serve.
Well, I believe all of the ESUs were represented at this meeting and some others on their staffs. And so, it was a packet that involved everything that Matt Huseman and Janine had done in the stakeholder engagements. So it had a copy of their PowerPoint, it had evaluation, it had, they have about 3 or 4 different activities that they did. And they went through their PowerPoint and some of the different activities and explained that during their presentation. And I think the focus was, it doesn't have to be done exactly like we did it. But there are some burning questions and some burning issues that we want to have stakeholder engagement on. We want to have your input on what you think could be some other indicators. We want to have your input on where we could consider putting the Title IIA set-aside funds or the Title I funds. We want to have ideas in those areas. We want to know how you define a well-rounded education in this state so that we know where deficits might be in some of our thinking. And so they put that together. That was distributed. Again, it will be on our website because we're working with communications on how to get that. I had a meeting yesterday with Katie to say we want that right there on the website so it isn't difficult for the facilitators to look at. And then we put out a goal to the ESU directors that wouldn't it be wonderful, because it was based on how many of them were there, if we could say we had at minimum 60 stakeholder engagement sessions throughout the state with so many different people informed, with the goal being overall that everybody would be able to know the goals of the State Department, the strategic plan, AQuest, and exactly what's the intention with the federal dollars under ESSA.
I appreciate that clarification, and as I sit here and think about myself as a board member, that could be something I could reach out to my ESUs to say, how can we work together to get more stakeholder engagement, especially in our rural areas, Molly's area, Rachel's area, my area, to help them and work together.
You, if I might say, just piggyback on what you're saying, you could absolutely today call the ESU in your area and they would know what we're hoping for them to accomplish. And expecting that they might not be expecting that we're going to give them a follow-up phone call, but that's in our plan. That's in our plan because we didn't want it just to go on a shelf.
Well, you might warn them that maybe Maureen will be out on hers. He's checking on them.
But can I?
We've engaged a retired principal from the Omaha Public Schools, who I know to be quite tenacious when it comes to this kind of thing, Denise McGowan, and she's set aside a lot of time and dedication and has also been a professional developer with the ESUs in the past, and so knows the lay of the land.
Thank you.
I'll say one thing, I'll turn it back over to them. I mean, since I'm the worst one, probably. Our reality is it's not just ESUs. So we would envision this also going districts, we would hope, would take an interest in doing this, in communities, and you could use that same information in a setting. So I mean, and again, it's one of the strategies, and I think we'll have more in the fact that it can go up online, and the fact that we could think about some other things that would maybe at scale be able to use technology to do that. But essentially, those activities give us a chance to pretty quickly gather the information that helps us right now, but the tools that we're developing help us for the longer term. So.
I know. Well, we really aren't going to get back. This keeps leading to more.
They're happy, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you want the input just on suggestions of other groups after or now or whatever?
However it comes to me.
Okay. Well, elected officials, service organizations are a couple of kinds of things. And then my question, and I do think I think all of us are committed to help in any way that we can. And I concur with Maureen. I think that those of us that represent a larger rural area really feel the voice needs to be there and wasn't. And that's not a reflection on the team here. You've worked very hard. I think it's a reflection on we need to do something differently to really get a lot of the rural voice that wasn't in attendance at some of the meetings. So if there's a modified toolkit that could be given to board members, you know, that if we have an opportunity, not necessarily to have the same kind of stakeholder engagement meetings, but I mean, I'm thinking about Rotary groups, and I'm thinking about different groups in the region that could reach out to
And that's the intention.
in a different
the
way.
whole thing, and then you could extract
Pieces.
whatever, and then we're having you send that back to us with the facilitator guide filled out there so that we know exactly where to input your information.
So if there's like a modified one that you could give to board members, if we have opportunities
I'm
to
working on it.
gather information, I think we all would be happy to help do that as well.
Oh. Oh, that's all right. You want a lawyer to talk again? That's fine. There we go. I appreciate the conversation. So anyway, I was just going to show you the big three on the last slide that we got from effective educators, and you've got it in front of you. The well-rounded education, the so-called Title IV funding that is somewhat new to ESSA, although some of that is still ongoing. When we went out and we asked, the feedback we got, as you can see from that pie chart, falls largely in the positive partnerships, relationships, and student success. Look at that. And the next slide, I think, that's off of your AQuest as to the 4 focus areas for positive partnerships, relationships, and success. And then if you go to your strategic vision, there's your goals for positive partnerships, relationships, and success. Obviously, those are some of the things you already did before we went and did stakeholder engagement, but the same responses we got in stakeholder engagement sort of reinforce what you did in AQuest, what you put in your strategic. So in the sense of, although we're doing all of this, some of this was already established and known, but it's good to have the feedback that what you did initially in AQuest, what you set out, and staff are looking at that, believe it or not. They're connecting the dots, looking at the AQuest stuff, looking at the strategic vision. Some of this reinforced it. So we just wanted to take that one to show you, but the reality is the needs that we heard from all of that. And again, the biggest block, educational opportunities and access, college and career ready, and then the educator effectiveness were the biggest blocks in that regard. So as you look at that, here's the next slide. So those were yours in that regard. So that we're kind of at this point, we've had big discussion. You've got the data report that you can look at. The staff is clearly looking for your inputs on well-rounded education, some of the pieces from the positive partnership, success, and relationships tenets that you might think are key for them to be utilizing as they're writing that portion of Title IV and the well-rounded education. And we can go back to any of those slides to help you with your thoughts if you have any. But that's one of the areas that is new under ESSA. And
I particularly think that was interesting, that last one, because one of the things I think we want to highlight there is how it aligns with AQuest. And so I had stakeholders identify activities that they have in place, and then we had alignment to AQuest, and then asked, well, where are we still missing those opportunities? And I think with the limited data set we do have the framework to continue those engagements, however that structure looks, to be able to input into the data set we currently have and build a better, more reliable and valid information.
That's a good question.
Yeah, sure, John, go ahead.
If my memory serves me right, in the act itself, doesn't it state that we have to list in the plan the stakeholders or people we engage with?
Well, the act itself that Congress put into place doesn't speak to that. The regulations that were promulgated by John King, the then Secretary of Education, had a big push on stakeholder engagement. Congress repealed those regs. The new Secretary of Ed put out a new template, and there was less emphasis by the current secretary on stakeholder engagement. The piece that got emphasized well by the current secretary is your governor, which we already had in that. But we're not, just because the regs don't require stakeholder engagement, we understood that's the importance, and that's part of, as I've listened to this isn't just about ESSA. This isn't just, it's about ongoing dialogue of Nebraskans about how do you lead and support the preparation of all Nebraskans for learning, earning, and living. And that includes workforce investment, that includes Perkins, that includes IDEA, that includes ESSA, and it also includes all of the rest of the state programs we run that aren't federal. So again, that's been part of the, I don't want to say challenge, but the shift in focus at the federal level from where this started out in December of 2015 to where we find ourselves in April. It's taken some steps forward, it's taken some steps back. There are currently no regulations in place to give guidance on what you have to have in the state plans for accountability, comprehensive state. The only regs currently in place are on assessment and the innovative assessments. So and again, part of the thing we learned at CCSSO, the legislative conference, Senator Lamar Alexander, who was a big proponent of getting this done in the Senate, the bipartisanship, was basically making sure the states knew you're in charge of your accountability systems. There are still, I'm going to tell you, there's some details in ESSA for what the accountability system has to have in place. By the subgroup are required to be part of accountability. If you remember AQuest, we have a group of non-proficient. Every one of the indicators we have, we're going to have to report out by the subgroups, which we didn't do in the first round of AQuest. That's detail behind the scenes, setting short-term, long-term goals for each one of those subgroups is part of the work. Setting the goals for the big picture, you've got some in your strategic vision, but there's a lot of detail behind the scene as to how you set those goals for African Americans, Hispanics, English language learners, kids with disabilities, poverty students. And that's a lot of detailed work behind the scene. And we will still, I believe, in AQuest have the non-proficient group because that was agreed upon because we have so many schools and districts that have so few numbers of all of the subgroups.
Yeah.
The real focus is on kids, all kids learning and being good in language arts, math, but also the well-rounded. What else needs to be there? And if you saw some of the earlier ones, the social, emotional health of students is obviously a focus, and you've heard it numerous times before. So,
Well, Brian, besides the goals, if you will, for the subgroups, are we required to track also?
we are required to report more data
Okay.
in that regard. I think one of the committees heard about that. There's foster kids in foster care. Military children are reporting groups that weren't there before, so that's new data elements were reported. They're not required to be in your accountability plan as a separate indicator, but we will report all that, just like we've always reported
Okay.
all the data. There's just two new groups we have to collect and report on in that regard, so.
Thank you.
Rachel?
So, can you walk through, the timeline around ESSA, but can we walk through a timeline of AQuest? Because I guess from my perspective, we should be making these kinds of AQuest changes simultaneously, so it isn't perceived that ESSA is driving accountability, but AQuest is clearly driving accountability. Now, on some of the things that you quickly showed and we really haven't talked about, and you don't necessarily need to come back to them, I think from our strategic plan, we have not necessarily as a board, I mean, you have done a lot of work, so I when I say this, we, that doesn't mean you haven't done the work. I'm talking about we, at the board level, have not done the work or thought through or been engaged with how do we take our strategic plan and ensure that those goals we have are now with an interface in AQuest, and what does that look like? There may be some goals that don't need to have an interface with AQuest, but some of the goals that I think were kind of up here were our strategic plan goals, but they're not necessarily really clear interface yet with AQuest. And it would seem to me, it's the cart and horse kind of situation, that if AQuest is our driving accountability system, as I concur it should be, and ESSA is falling from that, then we need to do some work with AQuest between now and June, so that the plan, the ESSA plan that comes forward clearly is emerging from AQuest, if that makes sense.
So my recommendation on that conversation, I think that's what we ought to do in May, but on rough high level, what I can take what we did last fall from an AQuest perspective on timelines included several different variables, right? One variable was we were changing assessment systems, so we knew that. So ACT coming in place is actually aligned with the conversations that we're having here. That obviously moving forward with the new 3 through 8 assessment system was part of that conversation. Actually, even at that point in time, the Perkins conversation was taking place and moving us that direction. The kind of in the work on the EBA and where we were moving with EBA was part of that conversation, that how those things would come together. And so I think it was Dean that kept referring to it as the convergence plan. It's like we have all these different things that are coming together. What we had presented around AQuest, and I think is a great point, the timeline that we have on AQuest is driving a lot of our thinking around how this ties together, but we haven't talked about it with you relative to how that happens. And so I think a detailed conversation on that front would be good. And there are some moving parts that I don't know every answer to yet, but we know that we have to have some type of assessment data be part of the system. We have to have EBA based on what we've done, part of that conversation. We have to have the ESSA pieces of the puzzle, fit into that as well. The timing of what we put into ESSA plan, there's probably a couple different philosophies relative to the ESSA plan work that I've heard from other states as well. Is do you put everything in there, or do you put just how you're meeting that, and then you tie it to your bigger plan? And obviously, as we work on the implementation plan, which is another part of that we have all of our team leaders working on and our teams, and that was actually part of our engagement with the ESUs as well, about what are the activities that are going to meet the statewide strategic plan for the board and how that comes together. So all those things are kind of rolling at once. That would make a great sense that we'd have a bit of a kind of work session with you around those topics and the integration of that. And it would really help us, I think, because I think we'll have some clarity around some additional feedback and input and what other states are doing, over the next month, and how that comes together. And your point about also Perkins and other things that we've already done to tie that together and go, that's how that comes together, because it's it is complex, and I don't want folks to think, well, you're going to tie all this together. Well, it is all tied together. I don't know how it's not tied together. It's just a matter of I always I used to say all the time that it's easy to understand but hard to explain. And I don't know what that means really, but I think that's what we got to do a better job of explaining that that effort to you, and I think, and having that conversation. But we really do listen in each one of those committees and talk, and I mean, our staff does and goes, okay, what are we hearing here, here, and here, and how do we bring that together to make sure we're carrying out what you want, so.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, a couple things yet. And I think that's really, important. And I think as you're thinking through that for May, as you could think through what really are the critical pieces for the board, as a part of this process, because there's some things that are probably ongoing pieces for the board, and then some pieces that'll just be reports to the board whenever. And so I think about assessment as an example of that. The board does cut scores. What are the kinds of things that are important board decisions versus reporting to the board? Approval of EBA changes, is that a board decision? Changes in raw classification. Think through what are the kinds of, in review points maybe, like if assessment changes, we do a cut score. Think through what maybe those kinds of functions for the board versus what you and staff do might be helpful from my perspective. And then the other thing is, if you can think about one of the other pieces, and I know, Maureen, you may have more from NASB, but one of the other pieces that was talked about and shared was the data quality campaign analysis that's been done on state report cards. And so I think it would be important to be integrating, and you probably have been doing that already, but maybe integrating for our discussion, what will our state report card look like going forward? And are there elements that maybe in the past we haven't had on a report card that we should? And that may not be a May discussion, but a discussion that at some point is interwoven, I think would be really helpful, so that we as board members can respond. That if somebody has a question about a data point or information, we can say, it will be on the report card. Or we can say, when it's ready, go to the website because you will find that information here. So that might be helpful as well.
And I'm going to add one more just because I guess I always add one more on those things. Rachel's right with all those other data pieces coming together. The other demand on the data, I mean, we certainly found out as we made transitions away from, and I think this is good, but it's a pressure point for us, is we started changing our data system to start to reflect the work that we're doing here. And schools were in the mode of using the old data approach to communicate to their communities and their staff about school improvement. And so it's an interesting conversation, and some folks weren't too happy that we were making those changes from a school level because they got kind of in that routine. Oh, that's where we go get that data. So change on those fronts is challenging, but actually really important, because at least I knew those schools were using data to make some decisions, and I think that was that part was good.
Right.
So do you have a summary? Do you want more? Do you want?
And there's more.
Do you have other people you want to say something?
I don't know. We've lost some of them along the way.
I noticed that.
They're back to their
writing,
other
yeah.
duties
I'm
besides
pretty
this
sure
extra.
they're working on something that's important.
Sure, that's okay. I think it would be a good opportunity to make sure that, it wasn't just myself or Janine or Brian, it was the entire team effort, and all the work that they've put in addition to their other jobs here have been tremendous.
So they seem to get there seems to be a lot of things under other these
There is.
days.
Yeah, it doesn't do it justice to everything that is on their plates, and so just appreciate their work along the way. It's truly a team effort. It's not one person. So.
Okay, board, anybody have one more thing?
Well, I'm going to go back to the 7 questions that were handed out yesterday, and I had, in preparation for this meeting, gone through those 7 questions with a whole host of questions that were part of NASB and what we've learned, and so we've gone through some, but not all, and so we'll save some for May. But I think a couple of the pieces, if we look at that guide as we prepare for May, it really would be valuable to help know that we can answer those 7 questions that were posed out by NASB, because I think those 7 questions do help us demonstrate, the ball is in our court. And that's such a shift for where we have been in education for the past 16 years. For 16 years, we have operated from a very narrow compliance role. And I mean, and this is a very short period of time, and the work that staff has done to transform just what we've done with AQuest and now into ESSA is truly a monumental task in transformation for where we're going. But we also have to take this opportunity, we as board members, that this is our opportunity. And if there are things that we have not addressed in this process, then ultimately we are responsible for not taking that opportunity. And no reflection is that on staff and the work they have done. I think they have done a great job, but if we have not thought through those questions, for example, that NASB posed and what our responsibility is, then we have shortchanged our constituents who put us here in the first place. So I do think that's an important part of our responsibility. So thank you for allowing the time for this discussion.
You're welcome. Anything else under this? We will, when we talk agenda after this meeting, we will certainly look for time to do that, to do this conversation again. This is, or a part of, won't be this whole conversation again, but to continue, because I think, as Rachel said, we're a community that needs to be engaged. And if the ball is in our court, let's keep it. And so, okay, thank you. Thank you. And thank you to everybody that is here, and thank you to everybody that wasn't here. Please, we send our thanks. All right. Okay, we're moving on. You have, it was mentioned yesterday, if you're attending anything, have you put it on the meeting participation? And I have an updated one that I don't know what I did with. Here we go.
Yeah, and it's updated on the.
Right.
on
I know some are attending the FFA Cornerstone Awards presentation this afternoon. Patsy is going to be a part of the Doan cadre, speaking on a panel. Several of you are going to the conference in Kearney on Monday and Tuesday. There is also an educational technology conference in Omaha, and I've got 3 people doing that. Rachel and I are going to attend the 150th birthday celebration, because I cannot say that word. And Standing Bear, and good, Lisa and Patsy are going to go to the new Board Member Institute. Does anybody have anything else that they want to go to?
I just have a question. It's not about going as much as it's probably an increased travel within a region. So I think that there may be some of us who will be doing increased travel within our region over the next 4 and 6 weeks as we try to help be a part of stakeholder engagement, and so just maybe more an awareness. Typically, we've not been putting in requests when it's just regional travel, but it's going to be an increase.
Yeah, if you are going to visit a school or you're going to visit a community, contact Dawn Lynn so she can, we have to have something official that says you're doing it. Just don't get up in the morning and say, oh, I think I'll go to Hastings today. If you want to be reimbursed, you need to have something formal, so. Yeah, right, okay. All right, is there a motion to approve the meeting participation?
Make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Denise? Lisa did.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran, John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Jones. 7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay. All right. You have some information items that you can look at, and we are now adjourned. A work session will be held on Thursday, May 4th at 2 p.m. Board meeting held on Friday, May 5th at 9 a.m. Thank you for attending.